Hey, if you're watching this, you know what it is. It's Tuesday, and it is AMA with LCJ. Today, we're going to be talking about, is collaboration fueling your success on your team? So we're going to be breaking down the stages that a team goes through. What are some things that you can encourage collaboration within your team to ultimately reach your goals? Do not miss out. Get in here, ask some questions. I'm going to put the link here. So hop into YouTube, and I look forward to seeing you there. If not, you catch this after I'm done. Go back and watch the replay. Make sure you drop some questions or some comments or what you want to hear from me. And I'll see y'all. Peace. Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Tuesday. I can't front. I could listen to this track all day long. Well, welcome to AMA with LCJ. I am your host, Latoya Collins Jones, and I am super excited to have you joining me today. We are going to be talking about team dynamics. This is gonna be a good, fun time. We're going to be talking really through the stages of that a team goes through, and after that, we're going to dive into any of the questions that you all may have about that. But I am looking forward to having some juicy conversation today. So I'm going to adjust my earpiece for a second, and then we're going to hop right in. All right. That was going to bug me. All right. So we're going to hop in. So today we're going to be talking about team dynamics and are they at play in your ability to be successful as a leader or even a member of the team. If this is your first time watching AMA with LCJ, thank you for joining me. If it's not your first time, you already know what it is. Make sure that you are putting questions and comments in the comment section. First of all, thank you. Thank you, Jana. Jana says she loves the fit. So it says young, gifted, and black. So that was that's actually it was a collection from Target, Black History Month, I believe last year. So appreciate that on the hoodie. Had to rep for Black History Month, even though I'm black every day. But you know, it is what it is, right? All right, what's going on, Jess? Thank you so much for joining me. All right, so we're gonna hop in, right? And the reason why I want to hop in is because I'm going to do a little bit of teaching first. So we're going to take a little bit of a detour, if you will, before we start talking and really getting to the questions, because I want to make sure that we all are on the same page as it relates to that. Okay. So if you got my newsletter, if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, you're missing out. But if you got my newsletter, then you already know some of the things I'm going to be talking about. But we're going to start with what are the stages that a team goes through. And the reason why I want to start here is because it's going to make a lot more sense in the conversations that we're having, to really kind of break down what we need to do as leaders as you're thinking about your team. So let's hope this is the right window. It looks like it is. All right, boom, it is. Okay, perfect. So if you've been around for a bit in terms of talking about team and team dynamics, what you'll find really is that this particular model from Bruce Tuckman is one of the most common models that people talk about in terms of phases of team development. And as we talk through some of these things, I think what you'll find is you're gonna be like, oh my God, I've been here. I didn't know it had a name. Like that, this is literally how you're gonna feel as you're going in. Now, what's important about each one of these stages is I want you to know that if you all find yourself in a different part of the phase of the team, it's not good or bad, it's neutral, right? So when you think about forming and storming and then you're kind of moving into norming and onward, I want you to remember that it's not bad, it just is. So as we go through and tackle kind of what each one of these are, as you can see, I wanted to make sure you can see who I gave credit for. Scott Graphis made this beautiful graph. I don't believe in recreating the wheel, and he did this perfectly. So we're going to go off of what he's created. Okay. Now, before we dive in, oh, thank you, Jana. Jana, actually, I just want to shout this out really quickly. She said, y'all, real, for reals. The emails are like a masterclass already. I'm telling you, I'm dropping the heat. It's like the preheat before the heat. You know what I'm saying? Like that's you know how you preheat the oven? That's what the newsletters are. So if you're getting the newsletters, then you already know what's up. And then you've kind of got a good pre-read before we're going into the sessions for today. Now, real quick, if you don't know how to subscribe to my newsletter, go to latoyacollinsjones.com and go ahead and hit the subscribe, put your name, put your email in, and I'll make sure that you get added to that list. All right, so let's talk about the phases of team development. So there are 5 phases of team development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Now, here's the reality of a couple of things. Forming and storming, especially for leaders, actually for everybody, can sometimes feel like the most difficult part of building a team and building collaboration, right? Now, I have some good news and I have some bad news. If you're a great leader, your team won't stay in forming and storming long, but you also can't force your way out of it, right? Like you're not going to be able to force your team. Your job is going to be able to lead them through these phases. And here's the other thing. Here's kind of I would say the bad news. I just said there was no bad. It just is, right? Which is every time you add someone into your team that is new, a lot of times, a lot of philosophies believe that you actually go back to forming again because you've now added a new dimension. So what is forming? So forming really is, if you notice, it's like that. It's like getting to know yourself, right? We're kind of a little bit maybe on eggshells, right? And so you're trying to figure out, okay, what's this person's working style? You know, just Latoya doesn't like email. What's her preference, right? Michelle doesn't like this form of communication. And so it's a lot of politeness, right? Like you're not trying to necessarily, you don't want to step on any toes. It's, hey, how was your weekend? It was good, right? Like you guys, you know where you're at. You're forming, you're figuring it out, but you're eager, okay? As a team, right? So you kind of have this, it's very nice. It's smooth, it's nice, it's not rocky. All right. Now, what happens is though, once you get from forming into storming, storming is where it gets really interesting, okay? And we'll go back and talk through a little bit of the strategies that you can do for each one of these. But when you move towards storming, what happens is this is where you're going to start to get a little bit of resistance. This is where you start to hear more about feelings and opinions, a little bit of competition. There's emotions, right? You're trying to figure out these group norms, right? So you'd be like, oh man, such and such, she always sends an email when she just could have copied, she could have just sent me a ping or called me, right? Or you could say, like one of my pet peeves was like, don't CC my leader if you haven't talked to me first, right? That was like one of my pet peeves, right? So a lot of these things, when you kind of move from forming to storming, you're trying to navigate the nuances of people's preferences, how you get work done. There may be resistance along the way. As leaders, this is also going to be a big piece of the puzzle of trying to kind of manage and set expectations, which is why I believe it's really important as a leader that you set your vision for your team. You should know what your team is going to look and feel like in the essence of what you're moving towards, because if you don't, you may find yourself in storming longer than you want to be. right? And so the big key piece of the puzzle with getting from forming, remember, that's just, I kind of put it to you this way. We're going to use this in terms of dating really quickly. Hold on. So, when you dating, you get that person's representative. When you're in the forming stage, right, of a team, you're getting everybody's representative. You're getting interview Latoya. Hey guys, how's it going? Right? That's typically what's happening. You're getting the interview version of that person, right? Like, and then when you move into storming, now you're out of this dating phase and you've now defined the relationship and you guys are like serious, right? You're committed. And that's typically where you start to find these little hiccups along the way, right? Like you're trying to be like, okay, I've got to figure this out. Now, what happens, leaders, when you're in the storming stage? I'm speaking to my leaders really quickly. If you're on the team and you're individual contributor, shout outs. All right. Make sure you may need to send this to your leader. Okay. Here we go. When you're in the storming phase, leaders, you have to make sure that you are setting expectations, not just for the work that's going to get done or needs to get done, but how the work gets done. Because if you are not careful, some of the storming behaviors that you don't want can ease their way into being a team norm. And that is not what you want. Right? Let me give you a good example. Say for instance, we're going to say Peggy likes to do things a certain way. Peggy likes to uh Peggy likes to have her documents a certain way. She doesn't want to go to the cloud. We'll just use that because that's a common thing, right? It's everybody's hybrid. She doesn't want to necessarily move over. She likes doing this way. Well, what happens is sometimes in that storming phase, the team may fight it, and be like, well, Peggy doesn't want to do this thing, but everybody else is doing this thing. And then as a leader, sometimes leaders don't want to have to storm through that rub with the team to kind of get it from point A to point B. So what ends up happening is everybody just works around Peggy. And so now the workaround becomes the norm. And so as leaders, it's really, really important that we do not normalize dysfunction within our team. Now that may mean, going back and say, okay, Peggy, like, hey, help me understand what is the resistance? Well, I don't know how to do this. Or like, right? You've got to troubleshoot because you don't want to normalize dysfunction in your team. Right? Are y'all with me? Appreciate that. Jana said mic drop. Okay. All right, leaders. So now that you've gotten storming, right? So you're going to get the resistance. There's going to be a little bit of rub here and there. It happens, right? Now you move to norming as a team. And so this is where everybody understands. They understood the assignment, if you will. If you got that, you got that. Right? Everybody's confident, everybody's committed, they're engaged, supportive, right? Everybody's a little bit more relaxed, right? Because even though forming, because let's go back to forming really quick, because even with forming, even though it still feels good, people are probably still a little tense, right? If you've ever been on a team, you're like, I don't know if I made the right decision. You're trying to figure this out, right? So when you hit that norming stage, you're going to start to feel things. Okay. All right. I'm good. I'm okay. All right. So that's going to be like a key piece of the puzzle in terms of how you move from storming to norming. So now you're norming, everybody's good. You're figuring things out. You've got a little bit of cohesion. But what you don't like, I won't say what you don't want, but what I love about my team, and it's important to get to your team, is hold on, y'all. This is really annoying me. All right. So what you're getting with your team is this. You want to get them to performing. Right? Norming means, okay, we're getting work is getting done, we're doing well, we're shaking hands, we're kissing babies, right? But when you get your team to performing, now you're in business. And so what you have is, and we talked about this last week, right? We talked about this last week with delegation. Typically, as leaders, it is hard to delegate if your team is informing, storming, and possibly norming. In order for you to be able to delegate more to your team leaders, you're going to have to get to performing stage, right? Because the motivation is high, the trust is high, right? You're hitting your deliverables, right? People are demonstrating they can handle the autonomy, right? So it talks about demonstrations of interdependence and self management, right? You can finally go on that vacation. I'll never forget the first time I went on vacation. Like for real, like as a leader, you was like, oh my God. People, like I went on vacation and did not check my phone, did not check my email. I said basically call me if the house is on fire. Like that was the only time that I expected a conversation. If the house is about to burn down, call me. If not, we're good. You will know you've hit your performing stage as a leader if you can take a week off and completely unplug. I think that's a good litmus test. I just made that up, but I feel like it's quotable, right? I feel like it's quotable. So if you're a leader and you still yet not hit a point where you can take time off and be completely unplugged and not worry about the work, then my guess is you've not hit performing, right? So in order to go from point A to point B, you've got to go from norming to performing, right? And then we'll touch briefly on adjourning, but this is not necessarily always the case. This is if so adjourning is a couple of things, right? It's also referred to as transitioning or the mourning phase, right? And that could be if you're handing off a process, right? A lot of times there's sadness, there's recognition. It can be, but typically these happen in projects. But I would also add adjourning also within the team when you have team members exiting. This is also very real, right? So when you have somebody exit your team, depending on how they exit, the way they exit, when they exit, I think that you can find yourself still in this adjourning phase. Now, it may not impact the whole team. Hopefully it doesn't, but it can, right? And your job at the end, the entire time of your job as a leader is to find ways to stabilize people through the phases. Okay. So in the chat, let me know if you're still with me. I know I got a few of you all watching on YouTube. Got a few of you all watching on Twitter, on LinkedIn, all the things. So let me know if this is resonating with you, because I want to make sure that you all understand kind of what's going on in terms of this. All right. So uh if it's making sense, we're good. Okay, perfect. So you've got forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. So thank you all for letting me know you're good. This is all making sense for you. All right, so I'm going to actually go back to just me and we're going to talk. So let's talk about, now that we have the basis of really understanding the phases of your team, what I want to make sure that we talk about as leaders, as your team is going through the phases, you've got to make sure that you're kind of reaching. Look, I've been reading this book. I've been listening to this book. So my first thought was like homeostasis, balance, right? You've got to make sure, hey Gustavo, thank you. I appreciate it. So you've got to make sure that you're reaching, right? You're hitting this point of homeostasis, if you will. Right. So as leaders, forming, storming, performing, or norming, performing, you've got to make sure that your job is balanced. You are not going to be, as a leader, able to will your team through the phases. Now, I'm a big fan. Here's what I'll say. Like, don't be afraid of storming, right? Forming's always going to happen. That's going to be the thing. Storming is where I see a lot of leaders get stuck. Okay? And that's where it becomes tough. Jessica says, how do you maintain that turnover? How do you maintain that with turnover on your team? Well, I don't think you can balance. Yes. How do you maintain balance with turnover on your team? I think there's a couple things. I'm going to take Toya's philosophy and then I'm going to give you a response to that. I'm the type of leader that I really felt like if I had a different team 2 to 3 years from now, because they've moved on up in 2 different roles, I've done my job well. That was my perspective, right? So I want to make sure that my team is always moving forward and elevating onto new roles. Now I get it, the market doesn't always, you're not able to always do that within the market that you have, right? Depending on industry, that's not always opportunities, but like for me, my expectation is I'm likely going to have some level of turnover most of the time. Okay? Now, to answer your question on how do you maintain that, I think part of the struggle, right, of how do you get the team through forming, storming, norming, performing is when you add somebody into the team, you introduce them to team norms. Don't allow them to figure them out. Well, what do you mean by that, Toya? As a leader, you have expectations. As a leader, you have a vision for the team. That's already going to help move that person in and through, right? A really good practice that I like to see is if you have new people coming into your team, hey, here's your work. Here's your work buddy. That's somebody they go to when they're trying to figure things out. So you have a buddy. A buddy is not a mentor. Okay. So you have a work buddy. This person's helping that person kind of figure it out. It's a safe place to start to build relationships and have questions. My expectation is that you have one on ones with everybody in the team to understand who they are and their role in getting to know them. Another really fun thing that I think a lot of people do is we would highlight and feature somebody on the team. We'd call it a one pager. In that one pager was your picture. There were hobbies, things you liked. If, I would be known for this, I would be this when I wanted. It's all types of one pager formats. Ooh, note to self. Maybe I'll make a template for you all to be able to share like, hey, this is, and you introduce that person to the team. Okay. So in the process of doing this, right, just as you're trying to reach balance, what you will find is over time, hopefully the time when you add somebody in, the time that you spend in forming and storming is shorter, right? Because remember, you can't will this forward. You can't push the team through forming, storming, norming, and performing. You can't push them through it, right? I want you to think about it this way. For those of us who have kids, right? Imagine if you tried to take a 1-year-old and put a 1-year-old in the 5th grade. Now, here's the deal. You could get them dressed, you could drop them off, you could stick them in there, but can they do the work? I mean, unless he's like a Mensa baby genius, right? It's going to be difficult to do that, right? So you can try to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to have him go through all the things. He's going to visit each grade every single day. And then all of a sudden he's going to be in the 5th grade. You can't do it, right? That's how I want you to kind of think about your team, right? Every step they're going to have to graduate from that and put in the work to do it. As leaders, our job is just to usher them and guide them throughout the way. And so I think as leaders, your job is going to be as much as possible is to just try to facilitate as much as you can, right? One of the things that I love to do as a leader was if somebody came to me, let's just say we're in storming phase, right? If we're in storming phase and somebody comes to me because they have issue or somebody did something that they didn't like and they were butting heads, we're in the storming phase, okay? And so as a result of that, as a result of that, one of my first questions is, well, hey, did you talk to Bob? Well, okay, cool. So tell me what happened. Okay, great. So here's what I think. What I think you should do is go back and talk to Bob, explain what's going on, and then let me know how it went. That's a way for me as a leader to facilitate them through the storming because I can't. What you don't want to find yourself in as a leader is refereeing all the time. Organizations pay you too much money to be refereeing. If you want to referee, go do that on Saturdays at soccer, right? You don't want to be refereeing. So you've got to figure out how to help them maneuver through it and encourage conversation. That helps a ton. Okay. So, great question, Jess. I hope that answered it. Let me know. And by the way, once again, thank you all for joining me um, on AMA with LCJ. Now, if you are watching, just so you know, I have the ability to answer questions live. So if you ask me a question, ask. Oh my goodness. I'm so country. I laugh. I crack myself up sometimes. If you ask me a question, and I will be able to answer it live because the purpose is I have what I have in mind for what I want to cover, but I never want to make the assumption that I know what you want to know. So if you're in the comments, you can actually comment. I will see your comment on my side and be able to share and answer your questions live. And so today we're talking about team dynamics and how that fuels success. So Jessica just asked a question about how do you do this if you have turnover within your team? And the goal is really just to guide, right? And so here's what I'll say too. When your team is informing and storming, you have to be an active participant as a leader. Forming and storming really is about trust. How do you build trust within your organization? How do you teach them to trust each other? Um, Stephen Covey has, I think I have it here. Hold on, let me see. Nope, that's not it. Let's see. Yes. Here we go. Um, so Stephen Covey has a book called Speed of Trust. Okay. In the Speed of Trust, and this kind of stacks on top of each other. And one of the things I'll say is as a leader, it's important that you figure out how to build trust within your team. Lack of trust within your team should be treated like a cancer to the team. If your team does not trust you, if your team, they don't trust each other, you're never going to get to performing stage. Facts. Okay. Hate to break it to you. You may get to norming, but it's probably got the essence of dysfunction. Okay. As leaders, it's really, really important. Trust has to be the bedrock of what you're doing. Notice I didn't say like. If you're listening to this on a podcast, I gave the side eye. Okay. Trust is necessary. Likability is not fully like I get it. Everybody wants you want everybody on your team to like everybody. I get it, right? Like I know that that's a thing. Um, but that's not always possible. But the team has to trust each other. Team has to trust each other. Okay. If they know each other and they can trust each other, you don't have to be heavy in like, but you probably have to be likable in a sense. Um, Great question. Gustavo says, "What does trust look like?" Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you asked this question, Gustavo. This is a great question, and it's a perfect segue into what I'm about to talk about now. Okay, so what does trust look like? First, I'm going to give you kind of Steve Covey in the I didn't come up with this model. This is Stephen Covey's Speed of Trust. Great book. Get it, read it, learn it, all the things. Let me share this window. Hold on, y'all. So in the Speed of Trust, you gotta love having like more than one window. Bless it. Okay. I wanted to move that over. Okay. All right. Here we go. Speed of Trust. All right. I'm kind of doing this so we can adjust it a little bit so it can kind of do what I need it to do. All right. Speed of Trust. Now, as we look at Speed of Trust in a couple of things, what does trust look like? So Stephen Covey talks about trust is really competence and character. These are kind of the four pieces of the puzzle, right? I love this model, by the way, right? So this is what trust looks like. So you have character and you have competence. Let me ask you a question. Is it easier to have trust with someone who's competent, who shows that they're competent in what they can do? Absolutely. If you have somebody that is showing that they cannot do what they're supposed to do, you lack trust. Now, then you have character. Show me somebody who has poor character. It becomes hard to trust, right? And so now within these two components, right, they have four cores of credibility: results, capabilities, intent, and integrity. All right. So within these four things, right, results, capabilities, intent, integrity, and then you have these 13 behaviors along the side, right? Deliver results, they get better, confront reality, clarify expectations, practice accountability, all based on results, right? Then they listen first, keep their commitments, right? Extend trust. You've got to, are they giving trust as well? Do they talk truthfully, demonstrate respect, create transparency, right wrongs, show loyalty? So, in a very practical way, Gustavo, I love this model for speed of trust in terms of what it looks like as a leader. Now, let's talk about what this looks like as a leader in a very practical way. So, this is the model, but in the reality of, hey, I'm leading day to day, what does trust look like? I think trust looks like a couple of things. One, we talked about this last week, was delegating and giving people opportunities to show and deliver results, right? It looks like delivering trust means that it's team building. Okay. It's spending time and understanding, hey, what are my norms? What are my preferences for communication? Right? How do I like and here's the thing, most people don't even ask these questions. You don't ask these questions of the people you're leading. You probably, I would say some people can't answer that question for themselves. And so as a result of that, you're figuring it out. And when trust is broken, there's kind of two camps. There are people who extend it first, and there are people who you have to earn it from. And once trust is broken, it becomes very difficult to do. It kind of depending on that person, their history, what happened to break the trust, becomes hard to mend that back. So trust, what does trust look like day to day? It means that I can trust that you can do the work, that you're going to finish what you started. So if you say you're going to do something, that you actually do it and you follow through, right? So it's two-way streets. Leaders, your team members have to trust you. They have to trust that you are an advocate for them, right? That you have the ability to advocate for them. They have to trust in your credibility and capabilities too. I don't know about y'all, but if you've worked with a leader who is low on the competency scale of the work that they're leading, it becomes very hard to trust. And so because you're lacking trust, how do you get to when we talked about forming, storming, norming, performing, it's hard to get to performing if there's no trust. I would venture to say, I don't think it's possible. Right? So you have to figure out like, hey, like, what does trust look like? And you can tell. Now, I'm going to go back to something that and if you have any questions, let me know, drop them in. I want to be sure to answer any questions that you have. But here I want to go back to something really quickly. If you follow me on LinkedIn, if you don't, follow me. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or any of the other things. What I want to share with you is this. On Monday, I released these things called Monday morning memos, and actually yesterday's memo came out this morning. I mean, not this morning, yesterday afternoon. It didn't come out in the morning. But one of the things I talked about was deep work. Okay. My question to you as a leader is, if you are so busy, you can't tell me what phase your team is in, you're too busy and probably need to block more time to think. Because if your head's down, if you're here, right? You're here, I'm working. And every now and then I kind of poke my head around, like kind of like kids, you hear a loud noise and you're like, what happened? And you kind of address it and then you're back here because you're too busy. Then that means that you possibly may not know where your team is at. You may think your team is in norming, but they're back there informing and storming. And so you've got to make sure that you poke your head out enough as a leader to understand where your team is in this phase, in the phases of development, in team dynamics, in collaborating, right? I hope this is making sense. Let me know. Let me know in the comments if you're listening to this after the fact. Let me know if this is helping. Okay. So in each one of these, you have to. I feel like I say have to a lot. I gotta work on another word. You gotta. That's the Ebonics version of it. But here's what I'll say. Um, as a leader, if you are setting clear goals and expectations from the beginning, that's going to be your roadmap and your foundation from getting from forming to performing. Okay. If you don't have clear goals and expectations, if you don't have a vision for your team, then you're already standing on shaky ground. Right? I'm gonna go church on you for a minute, but they talk about like building a house on sand. You can't build a house on sand because if something happens, wind blows, water comes, you lose the house. But you've got to build your house on a firm foundation, right? You've got to build your team on a firm foundation. What are your firm foundations? It's your goals, it's your values, it's your expectations, right? As a leader, your vision for the team. That's going to set the foundation for how your team is going to function going forward. And so as they're storming, what should happen is even as they're storming, goals and clearly expectations and values are always clearly communicated so that you're able to really understand and people are able, even as they're pushing, there's a level of boundaries that they won't cross or that they understand there's a healthy level of pushing boundaries. But because I have the foundation, we're good. Let me give you an example. One of the key values that I have with my team was excellence, not perfection. Means that you show up every day, that you give 110%, you ask questions. We make sure that we're kind and good to each other in the process. But we commit to everything with a spirit of excellence, right? Not perfection, excellence. And so because of that, anytime I felt like boundaries were pushed, they always knew to go back to excellence. They always knew to go back to integrity and being kind. One of my key values in the work that we did was people first and always. And so because of that, even if we added a new person, took a person out, and we had to reconfigure, it was the foundation of my expectations and values that allowed us to move through those a little bit more smoothly and possibly quicker. Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. Hopefully, yes, no, maybe so. All right. So really quickly, I know I've got some questions. Let me know if you have questions. Drop them in the chat. I want to make sure that I answer those or in the comments to ensure that I'm answering all your questions that you have. And I'm just going to check LinkedIn just to make sure nothing popped up. Okay. Good. All right. So with that being said, one of the key pieces of the puzzle, and I know I've got a few people here watching on LinkedIn as well. It's so funny. The tool kind of flip-flops. Okay, here we go. So now here's the question. So now we know what phase, what are the dynamics? We know the dynamics we're in. It would not be an AMA with LCJ if we did not talk about tools and techniques to actually figure out what this looks like. Okay. Because what we're ultimately talking about is team dynamics and collaboration. Number one. All right. Get your pen and paper out, leaders. We're going to talk about 3 really quick things that are going to help you navigate through these team dynamics to ultimately reach that performing phase. Okay. Number 1, communication. Understand communication, right? And how you communicate as a team. There's communication as individuals, and then there's preferred communication as a team, right? What does that look like? And so one of my favorite things to do is, sometimes as a leader, we had it. I had somebody on my team work on it, but there was a charter. We had a team charter, a technology charter, a communication charter. What does that charter say? We use Microsoft Teams. So when we think about collaborative tools and collaborative platforms, you think about team charters. What does the charter say? It says, hey, if anybody shares a document on Teams, even if you download it, the expectation is that you always edit it in Microsoft Teams, right? If you have a comment or question, make sure that you add the comment or question to the cloud document, not via email, for full transparency. I'm a huge fan of collaborative tools like Slack, Asana, Microsoft, Google Docs. Why? Because I believe in radical transparency. That's a value of mine. And so you can see who's asking the questions. Now, here's what's funny. You talk about forming, storming, norming, and performing. Man, get a cloud document with people commenting on it. You'll find out real quick where you are in the phase, because some people may feel some type of way, right? And and so as a result of that, what are your collaboration tools? What are your collaboration platforms? What does that look like for you and your team? Figure it out, create a charter, a communication charter. This will help in terms of moving through the dynamics, the team dynamics. Regular check-ins, that's number 2. Regular check-ins is number 2. Schedule one-on-ones. One-on-ones. I call them one-on-ones and drive-bys. That should be a book. That'd be a very confusing book, right? So because my team that I led was a large team, I couldn't do one-on-ones bi-weekly, just sheer volume, right? And what we're often finding, especially, or what I'm seeing a lot of times in organizations I'm consulting with, or leaders I'm speaking to and or coaching, all across the board, what you're finding is leaders are also individual contributors, right? Okay. And so as a result of that, it becomes harder to have like bi-weekly one-on-ones. So maybe you have monthly one-on-ones. But when we go back to talking about deep work, which is something I talked about in Monday morning memo on LinkedIn, if you have scheduled time to connect, make sure you schedule that time to connect. I think that that's worth the time. Okay. And making sure you're tracking, adjusting, but the regular check-ins help. So I had my regular one-on-ones. I didn't always talk about work in those one-on-ones. Sometimes it's how they're working. Hey, how do you feel like you're connecting with the team? That was something that I thought really, was often missing from a 30, 60, 90-day check-in with new people. Our leaders, as leaders are assimilating new team members, and Jess, this is actually a good question, another answer to your question from earlier. As you are assimilating new team members in that 30, 60, 90 days, you should be asking questions that helps them move faster to the team norm, right? Hey, how are things going? How are you enjoying the team meetings? Not just work, right? Within 90 days, their goal is also to want to understand work. Were there any questions you had about working? How do you feel like you're fitting in with the team? Any questions you had about how we work? Remember, if you notice, it's not just what I'm doing, it's how I'm doing it. Do you have any questions about why we do certain things? Don't ignore the how and the why, because the how and the why can also help you move through those phases. Okay. Jessica, I love it. He says, best advice for connection with your remote team. Absolutely. Love it. And she's talking about like collaborative tools, right? But get a charter, right? Do those regular check-ins. Number three is going to be important. Leaders, my leaders who are conflict adverse. Okay. Leaders, if you are conflict adverse, number 3 is for you. Okay. You've got to learn how to implement clear processes, right? And how you're going to manage if and when they don't agree. Because that's going to happen. Okay. And so how do you keep things from escalating and then ultimately impacting the morale of the team? So, leader, if I were to say, hey, right now you've added somebody into your team, this new person is not meshing with this person, their working styles are not together, what would your solution be? Do you have a plan in place? Do you have a fire plan? Oh, that'll be good. I'm gonna have to watch this back and have all my little nuggets in a nice little neat row, right? Do you have a fire plan? If and when, notice I didn't say if and when, right? As the team is forming and storming, do you have a fire plan for how you're going to go about solving things? What does that look like? I can tell you what mine is off the top of my head. Number one, typically, if it's the first time, I send them back. Back. Go back and talk to that person first. My first fire plan is I'm not fighting that fire. Allow them to wrestle through it a little bit. And I know, I get it. Leaders, sometimes we want to come in, we want to rescue and be the hero of it all. But sometimes we can't always do that. Okay. That's part one. Depending on if it's the first time of the issue and they come and talk to you, send them back. All right. If you're watching right now, I'm going to give you a perfect example. I'm going to give you a real life example. Real talk, real talk. Okay. Y'all ready? If you have siblings, I'm going to tell you why it's important to send them back, especially after the first time. If it's just the first time. If you have siblings, particularly, I'm the eldest of 3. Nobody likes a tattletale. And so it's important to send them back and be that, I would say, covering, right? Be a vault for them in that moment. Okay, great. You heard them out. They got it out of their system. And you're going to say, hey, actually, I want to encourage you before before I address it, I want you to at least go back and have a chat with that person. And your job as a leader is to coach them on how to have the conversation, equip them to have the conversation. Because remember, part of this to get from forming, storming to norming, and then norming to performing, they have to be self-managed. You can't get from norming to performing if they're not self-managed. You want that week vacation and not have to turn something off? You need to know, I'm about to use some Toya speak, but if something pop off, they can figure it out themselves. You want that, right? So that's the piece of the puzzle that you've got to get as a leader, right? You've got to have a fire plan. So for me, I don't intervene out of the gate. Hey, have you talked to that person? No. Okay, tell me. And sometimes they'll say yes. They'll say, yeah, I said, well, tell me what you said. Tell me how the conversation went. Because sometimes what they thought they said that they didn't say it. They went around the mulberry bush and they didn't communicate it in a way that was easy to receive, or that, right? Y'all with me? So that's kind of, for me, first point, I always point them back to the source initially. Now, if it has to come back to me, likely the conversation, I'm going to have one conversation, I'm going to have another conversation, and or sometimes I bring them both together and I establish the norm going forward. Right? But I'm always encouraging them to wrestle through it themselves and then go from there. Man, you talk about some rock solid teams. Let me tell you, some of the best teams I've been on, and honestly, some of the best peers I've had where we were a team where we were crushing it, was we could duke it out on a whiteboard or in a team room and then be able to go to happy hour after. Because we were all pushing, right? In performing, in that document, it talks about performing, right? When you get to norming and performing, part of norming is purpose and goals are well understood. In performing, you have high motivation, trust, and empathy, right? Individuals defer to the team needs. This is the piece of the puzzle, right? Like, yo, like we're all moving towards the same thing. We are ride or die for whatever it is that we're trying to do. I'm gonna translate for those who don't know what ride or die means, right? Like it means that we are 100% committed to our goals, our purpose, what it is that we've set out to do, so that if there is a rub, we're willing to push through being uncomfortable so that we can actually achieve what it is we said we were going to do. That's how you get to a high performing team. But if you don't understand your team dynamics and you're lost in your team dynamics, baby, you not gonna hit. If you can't answer that question, I would highly doubt, if you don't know where your team is in this process, I would be concerned that you actually not in performing, right? What I love about this in this document over here, from Scott Graphius, it talks about, one of the things he says is, in performing, you're guiding from the side, minimal intervention, right? Celebrating success is encouraging collective decision making and problem solving, right? They can figure it out. This is how you kind of move from point A to point B. All right. Okay. So we're getting closer to time. So I want to make sure that I'm honoring everyone's time, but I'm also making sure that I'm answering any questions that you have. Okay. So let me know. Let me know if you have questions. If you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all the things, let me know if you have questions. I want to make sure that I get those. Or excuse me, Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter. Let me know if you have questions, because we've got about 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure that we get your questions answered as well. Before we hop into some, man, it's crazy. Like today, I didn't know I was gonna have so much. Man, that felt good. I hope this was helpful for you all. I didn't even get to any of my other questions. Um, if you don't, I'm probably gonna try to tackle at least a couple of those. So I'm gonna give you a minute while I tee up from you all. All right. So I'm not seeing any questions right now. So I'm gonna actually go in and hop in. Um, and go from one. I'm gonna actually cover this one. I think this is gonna be a good one. Okay. In my experience, what are key elements for building trust within a team, especially in a remote or hybrid environment? Okay. In my experience, what are the key elements for building trust within a team, especially in a remote or hybrid environment? Okay. This particular question I like. Um, Ooh. Okay, Gustavo, I got your question. So I'm gonna make sure I answer your question, Gustavo, next. So when we talk about what are some key elements for building trust and team dynamics in a remote or hybrid environment? I think there's two things. One, I'm a fan of figuring out a way to get together at least once or twice a year. I know that's not popular opinion. I know sometimes people don't have the budget for that, but I will tell you, I think in person once or twice a year would do wonders for your team. Okay. If you have the budget, that would be my number one answer. Period. Point blank. I'm not saying everybody got to go into the office and be in the office all the time, but I do think there's something to be said about getting the team together at least once or twice a year, everybody collectively. Even if it's for a day, it would be well worth the time, because there are just some things I think that allow people to kind of form and bond differently when you're in person versus looking at an avatar or a person through the screen. Okay. Now, the other element I think we have for building trust within a team, especially in a hybrid or remote environment, is going back to, hey, let's go back to that communication charter. What is your communication charter for IM, email, working collaboratively? These are ways that I think in a hybrid environment become more foundational for how you're going to lead and building trust. Hey, what we want to do is, if you have a question, like, believe the best in everybody, go ahead and address that first. Hey, that's one of my things. If you have something that comes up, go to that person first, believe the best, believe they had good intentions first, and then go back. Okay. So that's one of the key elements I think for building trust within a hybrid environment. Um, you know, those check-ins are going to be huge. Making sure clear communication is going to be another one. Recognizing individual contributions. Create a culture of shout outs. That's another one. Create a culture where people celebrate each other. That's a great way to build trust. How often of a leader are you? Hey, are you somebody does something, somebody crushes it? Are you celebrating? What I found was people celebrated each other. And that's another way to build trust. Like, yo, I see you, you see me, we see each other. It's a great way to build trust, a great way to increase morale. So those are some of the ways I say we could build trust within a team, within remote and hybrid settings. But sometimes it's just time in the barrel. Okay. All right. Gustavo asked a question. I love this. Any advice for how to get the team trust when the leader is new in the industry? Ooh, that's a good question, Gustavo. I love this. Okay, so when we talk about getting a team to trust you when you're a leader that is new to industry, I'm going to go back to radical transparency. Okay. There's nothing worse than having somebody come in and pretend that they know the things and they don't know the things. So, my first piece of advice would be number one, spend a lot of time with the team, understanding. You know, I don't know. I'm more or less like, hey, you all, I'm so happy to be leading you all. We're gonna get the elephant out of the room. I know and recognize that I'm new to this industry, but I'm excited to be leading this team. And so over the next 3 to 6 months to possibly a year, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions so that I can better understand the team that I'm leading and the industry that I'm currently in. And as a result, my ask is that you are completely honest and transparent so that we can all learn and grow together. And my other ask of you all is that you be patient as I learn and try to figure these things out. And any information that you have that could potentially help, I'd be, that you think would be helpful, let me know. But I appreciate already in advance, your patience as I'm learning this. To me, that will build more trust than going in and trying to lay down the law. That's literally, honestly, Gustavo, if that was me, that's 100% how I would go in and do that. One of the other things that I think is really important for leaders, not just leaders in new industry, but leaders of new teams or across, which is don't go in trying to change everything out of the gate. Listen, understand, ask questions. Listen, understand, ask questions. I would probably ask a ton of questions first. I'd spend a lot of time listening, understanding, and asking questions. One of my favorite questions when I'm leading a new team or you're coming into something new is like, "Hey, tell me about what you do. If you could change anything, what would be one thing that you could change? What's one thing about this job that keeps you up at night?" Those are all really good questions. Ask those questions, and then it's going to start to really help open up not just understanding team dynamics, but the industry, and then going from there. That's a great question, Gustavo. Because once you add a new leader, y'all are back to forming, and you've got to figure out, and your job as the leader is you have to get the team to performing, ideally, right? Okay. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to do one last call for questions. But while I'm waiting for questions, I just want to let you know, make sure you check out LatoyaCollinsJones.com to go in and subscribe to my newsletter. This is where you'll find out all the things that I'm working on. And it's where I drop a newsletter every Tuesday morning that really sets the stage for what we talk about on I just literally had a brain fart on today's on the AMAs with LCJ. But also I'm super excited. I share with you all about the masterclass. Now here's a great example, radical transparency. I really wanted to launch this masterclass this month, but I've made the decision to push it back to March. So it's not too late to get in. If you are interested and you're watching this, like put in a comment, drop in an emoji. I'm interested. I'll make sure that I get you a link to set up some time for us just to chat. Because my heart of this masterclass really is to teach leaders to be the leader that everyone wants to work for. That's the outcome. So you're going to create a leadership success blueprint for how you're going to be successful as a leader. Some of the things that we talked about today will also be there. We'll go more in depth. You'll be able to ask more questions. But that's the heart of this Ignite Leadership Masterclass, is to help leaders set the foundation to really have a team that is performing well, to be a leader that everybody wants to work for, and that you're ultimately successful as a leader, and your team is great as a leader. And it is less theory, more tactics. Okay. And so I'm super excited about that. I will drop the link in here for the to set up some time with me. And then I will also drop the link if you want to just check out how to hold on, y'all. I'm not a good multitasker. I'm just gonna keep it 100 with y'all. Okay. Um, but I'm gonna drop the link if you want to schedule some time with me. I'd love to have just a quick little call to talk about 30 minutes. I call them leadership momentum questions, leadership momentum sessions. Wow, I'm all over the place. And it's really where we go in and we can just discuss like what's going on in your world. What does this look like? Maybe you could come away with a couple of strategies. It's a 30-minute call. So I just want to encourage you to schedule 30 minutes with me. I will tell you, these will be gone after May 1st. I am shutting down leadership momentum calls, not May 1st, March 1st. For real, March 1st will be the last time I book these calls. And then I'll also drop in the link to check out the information on my course. And I'm super excited about that as well. So if you have questions, let me know. Send me a DM, all the things. I'm not seeing any questions. So with that being said, hold on. I just want to make sure before I log off that I drop in the information for copy pages URL. I'm going to drop that in there as well. So this is for a beta. I'm looking forward to working and chatting with each of you all. So schedule some time. I don't charge for the 30 minutes right now for the leadership momentum calls. So schedule it. Hop on my calendar before it's too late. March 1st, it's done. No more leadership momentum calls, at least for the foreseeable future. So get in now and let's have some conversation, see where I can help and assist with you. If nothing else, so like I said, you'll come away with some tips. And yeah, listen, I hope you all have a great week. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, I'm telling you now, I'm going to be dropping more content on my YouTube channel. So make sure that you go in and log in and subscribe, like and subscribe. Some of the stuff, I'll still do AMA with LCJ across all my platforms, but I'm going to be releasing exclusive content for YouTube. All right. So if nothing else, I want you all to have an amazing day. And if you have any questions, any comments, you can always find me, send me a DM on, all the places and spaces you're watching this right now. If you're on YouTube, just let me know, put it in the comments. But thank you. I do not take it lightly that you all give me an hour of your time for me just to share my love for teaching and share my love for leadership and really making an impact in people's lives. We get to do this. We get to lead others. Leadership is a privilege. And so thank you for allowing me the privilege to teach you all today. And if nothing else, I'll see you next week.